Hi, welcome back to episode 6 of Data Mesh TV. Today's episode is focused on data monetization. Now, data monetization is something that fascinates me. And I think from a data mesh perspective, I think it's something we can really pull together, kind of merge the two concepts together to help each other out. I don't know that a lot of companies are successful yet in actually monetizing data. What does that even mean, right? What does data monetization mean? Is that an internal value? Is that an external value? I think so. Are we trying to create a real economic number for it, or is it just some kind of generic value? I think it's an economic benefit that we're really, when I think about monetization, I think about what's that dollar value that I'm associating the data? How do you do that? That's the first question we'll get into. We also need to start thinking about how the data mesh can actually help you drive a data monetization approach. So for example, once we get into the conversation, I hope you'll start thinking about what is that framework, right? Am I just going to go out there and say all my data should be monetized? Or can I start thinking in terms of domains where data can truly be understood and data products where I'm taking data sets and pulling them together? I think I can monetize a data product. I think it's a much more effective approach in trying to monetize everything behind me, so to speak. And if I can do that, how do I sell it? If I can do that, who values it? And if I can do that, how do I make sure that what I'm selling them is something they're going to be able to reuse and share? Data monetization, I think, and data mesh are two topics that are going to start to come closer and closer together. And today, we'll take the first step at really trying to understand what that means. I'm fortunate to have Alex Scroggins. He's the CTO for Your Data Connect. I think he's an expert on data monetization. It's a topic that I have already said I'm really curious about, and I hope Alex can bring his big brain to the conversation and educate all of us. So welcome to the show, Alex. Now, before we get into it, you and I have something in common, right? SEC football, right?
Right.
Today's date is important, but even more important than today is October the 8th, when my school and you're a fan of Alabama come together on the field. And so I'm excited for that. Are you going to go to the game, Alex?
I'm not, but I'll be watching.
You're not? I'll be there. We'll take Data Mesh TV. We'll film a show.
Okay.
Awesome. Hey, let's jump right into it. So in the opening, I presented the idea that we should start thinking about the data mesh as a tool or as a mechanism to help us start to create a structure or to create a framework for data monetization. We talk a lot from a CDO perspective about data value all the time, and measuring data value is hard, right? Yes, it's valuable. Yes, we know that it's useful, but what does it really mean, right? And when you talk about monetizing, you're starting to think about economic benefits, economic numbers, so to speak. There's a dollar value tied to the data because somebody thinks it's important. So I think it's hard for a lot of, myself included, for a lot of people to understand what that really means. And it'd be great to get into some examples. But let's first start off with that basic question. How do we monetize data?
Sure. So great question. It's there's two ways to think about it. Data monetization could be based around how you use that data internally, using it to find opportunities to grow revenues, reduce costs, or manage risk. So it's not really the data itself you're monetizing, it's use cases of that data, how it affects my business and the bottom line. It could be external as well. So perhaps I have an opportunity to anonymize my data and sell it to a third party. So we can get into some of those use cases, but both. And what's definitely most common is that internal monetization. A lot of companies not ready or in the right industry for that external monetization, but everybody can do internal today.
Actually, I think you're right. I think you had a good point here a second ago. We talked about the anonymizing data, because initially you would think, hey, I'm going to monetize a data field or a data element. I'm going to sell that. And if I mess with it, it's not going to be as valuable. But I think what you're implying there is like, hold on a second. If we take a bunch of data together and we create an opinion or we create a position or we give somebody something they can make a decision from, sometimes that detailed data doesn't make any sense. Rather, it's the outcome. It's the insight that you're getting from the data that you're really saying. You're monetizing the insight, not actually data field. So I can hide all the privacy data, but it's still valuable. I think that's really interesting. On the internal side, I was reading some examples from different kind of pieces out there that I saw, some of the stuff from Your Data Connect as well. And some of the internal examples they talked about was using data to reduce costs. internally. We talked about using data to drive efficiencies, whether that's a supply chain model or another model, using data to create efficiencies, to save costs, or to move and to deliver products faster. They also talked about using data to create new business models, right? How do we take our existing data and create new business models? Every one of those is data value for sure. And I think when you sit back and say, okay, so what's the dollar value? Are we actually assigning dollar values to those data sets?
Absolutely. So that is something that can be done, and again, it's based on the use cases, and you might have many use cases for your data set. But what we've helped some of the companies we work with do is basically estimate the value of data as it contributes to some business case, like increasing my upsell and cross-sell opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's many components to that, but there's a workforce component. But absolutely, some of that identifying the best opportunities is based around the data. So that means, well, we have high data quality around these opportunities where we can cross-sell and upsell, and so you can basically allocate a portion of the sales. Let's say we successfully upsold and cross-sold. Well, what portion of that is credited to the data that we had, the data that we used to do that? So,
what are customers asking? I wonder. So the customers you deal with, is their first question, "Hey, I've got a whole bunch of data. Tell me what's valuable"? That's a big question. Or is it, "Hey, I'm using this data. I know it's valuable. I'm trying to find ways to to really identify what's the most valuable. I'm trying to find ways to really create a business case for more investment." I mean, what are the questions companies come for? Do they already have a model that you're assessing, or are you starting from ground zero with these organizations?
It's a mix of both. A lot of times starting from ground zero, and a lot of times the question is, how do we communicate the value of our data management program to the business, to the CEO, to the board?
Yeah.
So that's where we get into, based on industry, what data products are common in your industry, and given your company and the data you have, what data products does it make sense for you to make, and which ones will give you the biggest bang for the buck? So a lot of that research we do is, what are the different data sets by industry, the data products, how do you value those, both internally and externally? And then once you have that model, building that inventory, think of it like a data balance sheet, where I'm showing not only my spend on data, like on the liabilities and equity side of that balance sheet, but data assets on the left side, where I have an asset such as my customer data, and the value for that asset is going to be derived for how I'm using that to further increase sales to those customers, maybe reduce some of the cost around retaining those customers and acquiring customers. So that's typically the model. It's basically justifying that data management and spend.
I love it, because I think you're creating like you described, a balance sheet of sorts, right? So here's the total cost of ownership for my data, from the point that I collected to the point to where I store it, to how I analyze it, to how I present it, and then here is the actual economic number that I create from it, right? So this is the value that it generates for the company. Here's how much I spend, and you can start to kind of make more effective trade-off decisions. Am I storing it the right way? Am I analyzing it the way? If I could only reduce the TCO for the data, I could create a more positive kind of balance sheet, so to speak, for those data sets. That sounds really, really interesting. We're talking business for data. I know on the IT side, having worked in IT for 20 something years, it's difficult to draw direct lines of value from IT to the business. We know IT is valuable. We know IT drives business outcomes, but it's hard that when you work in IT sometimes to say, I do this and it generates that. There isn't a direct line. Right. But with data, you can start to draw those direct lines. I manage this data. This data is used in this way. This data drives these decisions. These decisions create these outcomes, whether it's revenue, or whether it's efficiency, or whether it's customer, sales approaches, whatever it is. All of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm doing something that's helping the company. So I think that's super neat. Let me come back to another question. So all right. So a lot of different ways to do it, so to speak, right? Internal lens, external lens. How do you sell it? Like, how are people actually selling data? That seems to be even more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. So our background at our company is actually data governance. So we bring to the table that strong knowledge of what's permissible when it comes to data sharing. So It's going to depend on industry, but a lot of times the data which is sold is anonymized and maybe aggregated at a very high level, all personally identifiable information removed from that data set or masked, masked, encrypted. But it depends on the industry, the type of the data. I'll give you an example from one industry. So we work with some property management companies who own hundreds of thousands of apartment units across the country.
Yeah.
So part of applying, for a rental apartment is I have to fill out a lease application. They collect some demographics information on me. They do a credit check, employment history, and things of that nature. Valuable information and needed to determine if I'm would be a reliable renter. But that data has benefit to, potentially retailers that want to see demographics for a certain area, but anonymized. We don't need anything personally identifiable for that data set. So all personal elements removed, but still, like, what is the credit score? What is, income level and so on for renters in this, neighborhood? Retailers could use that to decide what type of property to build, in the surrounding area. So it's going to depend based on the industry that you're in. There's a lot of established data brokers, especially in telecom. They collect, they purchase data from or the brokers within telecom. They purchase that data, sell it to retailers. Same use case. Property management, data again is sold to retailers. So those are some very common, users of that data, but, pharma as well, a lot of use cases around.
I think pharma is probably leading in this space. There's a lot you see on the pharma side where there are a number of different data sets already being sold, already being purchased, already being reused.
Yeah, exactly. So there are some established data brokers that you can go to put this. They already have platforms. They'll help you, anonymize your data, kind of guide you on that, and then provide that platform to share it. And sometimes the form of this is connecting you directly to a buyer. Sometimes it's called a reverse marketplace, where we know this particular company has some valuable data, and there's potentially multiple buyers that want exclusive access to that data. So the reverse marketplace lets the buyer list the data for sale, and basically the buyer will come and kind of bid on it. So
right,
a lot of different
models. Wow. Because they're bidding on the data because they will own it uniquely. Once one person buys it, they don't want anybody else to have it. Interesting. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
So bring it back to data mesh a little bit. When I was thinking initially, and the reason, thank you for joining the show when I brought you on, is because I do think this is something it's going to grow and it's going to evolve as people start to understand more and more how to use and how to build and how to share data products. There's something there about monetizing data products. I may put a couple ideas out there, right? And let me just, for the audience, just kind of put the picture together, so to speak, right? And so in a data mesh, hopefully all the listeners have the basics, right? But let's cover a couple of key points, right? We're talking about taking data from a lot of different places. We bring them into some logical domains, right? So in your organization, you can imagine your consumers, whether it's an analytics team or a business team, they will consume data in a domain where they feel the most comfortable, right? They know they go to the finance domain or the retail domain or whatever, function they work for. That's their domain. All their data is there. So they understand the data, these domain teams, right? They value the data more than maybe some of the technical teams because they know how it's actually being used. And so a really tight partnership there between the business and the data in these domain groups. And these domains start to create data products. And I think that's where the magic happens, because a data product is structured. A data product is described. A data product has a quality measurement, right? It's not just putting data together. It's putting data together, describing where it came from, assessing the quality of the data, defining who else is using the actual data product. And so there's a lot of value in that data product. I'll toss a word out there. I may be using it incorrectly, but when I read it, I said, this resonates. The idea of a data currency, right? If I'm managing a data currency, it's got to be structured. It's got to be consistent. I just can't make it up, right? There's got to be some model to it. And to me, that data product is the model, right? It's a structured framework for us to say, I can put a dollar value on it, and here are the expectations that I have, right? I know where it came from, so I can trust that it's going to hold its value. I know that it's got some, I can at least assess the quality, so I know how to value it. I know who's using it, so I know who thinks it's important. And so there's a lot in that data product besides just the data, the metadata, that I think it makes it a perfect vehicle for us to say, great, now I've got it. Now I can sell it. Internal versus external. I think most of us, and you said it right, Alex, I think a lot of us are just really trying to focus on the internal side for now. And that's okay. I think there's a lot of, there is great value in monetizing internal data. If I'm building a business case and I can say, this is the value of the data that I'm going to create for you, it's fantastic, right? There's all of a sudden a bigger urgency or a bigger push to invest, and vice versa, right? I'm building a business case for data that doesn't have that same high value monetization. Maybe you want to sit back and say, hold on a second, am I focused on the right data set? So there's a lot of value there. But let me step back. So you just heard my data mesh proposal, right? The reason why I think a data mesh can be a great vehicle for driving data monetization, specifically data products. What would you say, Alex? Is that a good way to think about it? You think data products can really kind of help?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of times, I'll say it this way: data mesh, great architecture solution for, as you said, you have different domains and different sets of data. Maybe I want to combine those different data products together to produce a new data product. So that is something we've done a lot of work around in the monetization space, around helping customers calculate a customer lifetime value, given multiple data products as inputs. So think about that. If I want to calculate my customer lifetime value, I need information on marketing. How am I marketing to these customers, and what's the cost around that? Are these customers, I have to retain these customers, so I have to give them a level of customer support. So there's data around customer support. There's also order history. How often are these customers ordering from us? How often do they return products to us, as an example? So I could use all those as, each one of those is its own data product, but I could use those together to produce a customer lifetime value data product to understand who are my most valuable customers. Maybe I want to segment those customers based on their lifetime value and market to them differently. So data mesh is a great solution for data products and deriving the maximum value of your data.
Yeah. So let's take it one step further then, right? Because I think if we agree that data mesh is a great vehicle for doing that, then I think the next challenge for us to think about, just like anything, right? Anything we're trying to monetize, anything that we're trying to attach a financial value to, there's a couple sides to it, right? So how much do I spend creating it, right? So that balance sheet you talked about earlier, how much is it valued for on the outside, right? And so I don't want to spend more money building it than I can sell it for, right? Whether I'm selling internally or externally. And then I get back to the TCO of a data product, right? I think there are organizations today that are already selling data. And I will tell you that the TCO, that total cost of ownership for that data product or whatever they're calling it today, that data element that they're selling, the data product, I think it's too high. And I think we should step back and look at how much it actually costs us to create the data product. And from the beginning to the end, right? From where it came from where it's stored to how it's analyzed. And we can reduce that TCO. What you do is then you reduce the cost, or you can increase your margin. You can say I get more value from it. But if we're doing that internally, if I reduce the TCO, I'm increasing value. I spent this much to build it and I've created this much revenue. That's a much better proposition than when I think a lot of times we're flipped right now. We're spending way too much money. Might be controversial to say that, but we're spending way too much money creating these data products and then not getting the right value out of them. And so I think lowering the TCO for those data products is an important step. And that's something that I'm not sure that enough of us are thinking about. So when you go into an organization to monetize data, you mentioned the balance sheet earlier, do you guys look at how they build the data, whatever they're selling, the actual TCO side?
We do. So we get into, we basically begin with what data products do we think are appropriate for your company, for your industry? And then we get into the how. So, how can I build those given the text, for example, the tech stack I already have? If I'm interested in external monetization, what third-party brokers make sense? But we do get into that, like what skills are needed to actually facilitate this data monetization, what technologically is necessary as well. So we do get into TCO as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you start from right to left, you start with the business is what it sounds like. And so what are the outcomes you want to drive? Great. What is the data that you're going to need to drive those outcomes? Got it. Fantastic. And then how do we get you that data? Right. And if somebody says, we got to migrate it someplace, well, then it's going to take a long time. If somebody says, I'm going to put it in an expensive analytics engine, then we're going to say, well, that's going to be costly. If we can say, hey, we can connect to the data where it is and we can analyze it where it is, so to speak, or we can analyze it via something like Starburst, then fantastic, right? I'm able to kind of get started much more quickly I'm able to create a long-term sustainable TCO for my data product that I can grow, that I can manage, that I can optimize. And then that gives me an opportunity to continue to not just deliver for that specific outcome, but as new outcomes, as new business opportunities present themselves, I can say, great, let's do the same thing. Let's repeat, let's refine, and let's iterate. So you mentioned a use case a second ago. You mentioned the customer use case, kind of customer lifecycle use case. Can you give us a good external use case, something you're familiar with that maybe would kind of start to drive a bit more the idea of how people are selling data externally?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mentioned property management. There is a data broker called GeoFi, and what they do is they work with those property management companies who are collecting lease applications. They help those companies anonymize that, and then they sell it to retailers. They help figure out, well, what type of restaurant should I build in this, in this location, given the demographics of the people that live there, given, factors such as, credit score, income. Does it make sense for me to build, a fancy restaurant or something else, right, within this neighborhood? So that's an example.
Yeah.
So within pharma, we do a little bit of work, but that's mainly around the purchase side of purchasing. Let's say this. Which doctors are filling which prescriptions.
Yeah.
So we want to, as a pharma company, we want to purchase that data, acquire it so that we can figure out how to pay our sales reps. That's kind of the opposite side of it, where we're buying data to use internally to drive our compensation to reps. So those are a couple use cases involving external.
I find that the pharma side, because I think they're probably ahead of some of the other groups. I just, with a couple of conversations that I've had on this topic there, one of the questions that comes up is, we're buying this data today and we spend this much money. So it's expensive. I mean, it's not cheap to buy this data. When you give someone the opportunity to connect a lot of different data very easily on their own, that you start to ask an age-old question that we've been asking on the architecture side: build or buy, right? Well, you know what? Is it cheaper for me to build my own data products? I've been buying these for some time off of this hub. Maybe I can start to build some of that myself. I know where the data comes from. I can aggregate it myself. And so I think that's something that's going to start to kind of, not just in pharma, but I think across other industries, you'll start thinking about how you can start to kind of generate your own data sets, mixing external data and internal data to create data product value or data monetization internally. So can't wait to kind of see that start to grow a little bit more. But there's a lot of maturity we need in this space. Obviously, I was really impressed. I know that we didn't show your slides, but Alex, you sent some slides earlier, and I was going through them, and I was like, wow. I mean, we're talking about it at a very high level here, and we're trying to kind of present a simple story. Hard to do, but doing our best. I think when you sit down and show somebody the math behind it, right? Some of the formulas you were walking us through in your spread and your slides. It's complicated, right? It's not an easy topic, but I think that's the level of structure. That's you need these detailed formulas to consider all the different variables that change, all the different variables that people want an opinion on, so to speak, so that you can come back with that right number, right? This is, and it's not just about saying here's a number, but it's about being able to say, and here's how we came up with the number. And here's how we make sure that these variables are controlled, that they're not going to flip, so to speak, that there's some structure behind it. So I know that we skipped your slides, Alex, but I was really impressed. I'll tell you, where would somebody go from a Your Data Connect perspective if they're looking to kind of get more data? Is that your website just to kind of go? Is there like a white paper or something you guys publish?
So on our website, yourdataconnect.com, we have the ability to search by industry and by company. For example, Coca-Cola, and we see an estimate of what we think their data value is given publicly available information. So we do things like read SEC 10K reports. We have automation that scans multiple data sources ingested in a data lake. And we have a team of analysts who build these models. We automate those. And, there's probably 500 or so companies on our website where we've estimated the data value. So you can see those high level estimates and see the breakdown by data product. That high level estimate is the sum of one or more data products that, we know that those companies have internally. So definitely that's a great starting point, yourdataconnect.com.
So how many different industries do you work with? Is it pharma, finance? You mentioned,
consumer packaged goods, absolutely. Restaurants, hotels, casinos, We have covered at this point, I believe 65% of the S&P 500. So
Wow.
I believe it's 25 to 30 different industries, um, but we're constantly adding new ones. So check back frequently the website, and every week we add more.
Alex, I'm going to ask you a question live. You don't have to commit live, but I would love to kind of take the conversation we had today and turn it into something. A blog almost seems too simple for the topic, but turn it into some, maybe a white paper or something to help others understand how to monetize data products. And I'm not going to presume to say that there is a way that works for everybody. But I do think that there are some structures, some ideas, some examples that everybody can benefit from, because there's a lot of people. You said you've done this for 65% of that S&P 500, I think.
500, yeah.
Wow, that's really impressive. And so it's impressive because I know in a lot where I came from and a lot of places where companies that I talk to, they're still trying to figure this out. And so I would think it'd be incredibly valuable if we sat down and shared some of this. Because like I said, I don't know that anybody's really figured out that you have a formula for monetizing data, but there's a bigger formula and approach for how to get started, how to do it, and then how to kind of refine it over time. And I think if you do that while you're implementing your data mesh, it's a perfect time to do it, right? You're getting started, you're building data products for the first time. You can start to monetize them. You can start to value them in the right way. Is it always a dollar figure, Alex? When you monetize, is it always an economic number you tie to it? Or sometimes do you ever come back to the high value, low value? Or is it always an economic number?
We so far we've been able to get to economic, dollar numbers for each of these companies, and,
Wow.
and some of the work we do is it's not only that number, but is that number captured in the stock price of the company? So maybe we think this company, a lot of the financial analysis which is out there, it's looking at traditional assets. If you read the accounting definition of an intangible asset, it doesn't really include data. It includes things like my patents, trademarks, maybe customer data I might have purchased externally, a customer list, for example, but not data that I'm generating myself internally. So, so therefore, a lot of that value of data, we believe it's not accurately reflected in the stock price of a lot of these public companies. So that's something else you can see on our website. It's basically a percentage. We call it the DMI, Data Monetization Index. And it's that ratio of the data value to enterprise value of the company. If it's low, we think the company is undervalued when it comes to their data. Yeah.
Wow. Impressive. I'm so much more we can do on the topics. I'm looking forward to working with you, Alex, CTO at Your Data Connect. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Adrian. Great to speak with you.
Great. So that was a really, really good opening conversation. I think we covered a lot in this kind of first 30 minutes, and there's a lot more to cover. But let's kind of cover some of the basics, right? One is when we think about data monetization, what we're talking about is an approach for giving your data some kind of, or measuring the economic benefits of your data, probably a simpler way to say it. You heard Alex talk about not only do they provide a dollar value for the data, but they also help you to assess what the impact to your stock price might be, right? So there's a data monetization index, a DMI. That's really, really interesting. I was surprised by how many organizations they're already working with, because I feel like this is an immature space. That makes me feel maybe it's more mature than I thought. That makes me feel that maybe there are a lot of companies out there further along on this journey than I had anticipated, which is fantastic. Because I think that when we think about monetizing data generically, I think that's hard to comprehend. When I think about monetizing data products, all of a sudden, there's context, right? I can actually look at a data product, and for all the reasons I described, right, there's a structure. I know where it came from. I know its quality. I know who owns it. I know how to use it. I know who else is using it. All that's contained in a data product. That gives me everything that I need, not just to give it value, but also to protect its value. And so I think the data mesh approach fits perfectly with any organization that's looking to monetize data, whether that's internal monetization for reducing costs or generating greater value from an efficiency perspective, or whether it's actually externally selling data. I think that data product can be really helpful. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed episode 6. I hope to see you for the next episode, episode 7, coming at you in about a month. Cheers.